So for those of you guys that are here for the first time, every once in a while we do this cafe style that you might have heard mentioned, which is we divide up into groups and have a little discussion time and not just listen to some joker from the front give the official version. So we're actually, sometimes people start off with a little intro from the front and different ways, but today we're going to jump right into the groups from the start. And so I would want you to think about that last verse of the passage, the text that we read, and right now we'll switch into groups. So I think there's some facilitators. Would those folks stand up, please? Yeah. Now you guys will have to migrate to different corners of the room, and then if with these four people here, if there could just be a equal number of people huddled around them, so we can get into some discussion questions. The facilitators know these questions, and we look forward to hearing your answers. So please migrate to one of the facilitators and pull your chairs around. Thank you. All right, I'm very curious to hear about the first question and how audacious and how big and bold and how far our hearts and minds can run in terms of superpowers. So anyone want to share an example of what they would change in the world if they had a superpower? Don't be shy, don't be shy. This is good stuff. Do I have to call on people? Come on now. Okay, Steffi. What? Emphatically, yes, I should call on people. Yeah? What would you change in the world if you're a superpower?
Yeah, I said, I'm loud enough. Okay. All right. So, okay, I'm standing. I feel like I'm in class. Okay, I said if I could change something, I would remove apathy from the minds of people, and the reason being, I've seen more harm being done by people who choose to do nothing about things than by people who intentionally do something wrong. So.
Woohoo, huh? How about applause for that one? Okay, I'm on the hunt since there's no volunteers. Anyone volunteering? Denvin, thank you.
What's the question? Sorry. I said something like, I wish I had some kind of power. I don't know exactly what that power would be, but something that could make people or meet the needs of every single person that's out there, so that they can feel secure about themselves and not have to worry so much about themselves, that they can then care for other people, kind of thing. So it's kind of along the lines of what she said, but yeah.
Beautiful. Totally beautiful. Awesome, awesome cause. All right. The smart people are trying not to make eye contact, and when you do that, you get chosen, Betty.
I knew you would. Well, I said teleporting because it just reduces time, saves us a lot of money in terms of fuel, emissions, so traffic.
You would invent the telephone?
Teleporting.
Teleporting. Okay, very good.
Even you have to travel from Tamil Nadu.
Yeah. Very good, very good. Right. Superpowers.
I think I would be a superhero from the show called Invincibles, and so basically she could make anything out of atoms, and the line would be she can't create humans. Anything living she can't do it, but fruits, something to eat, something to a burger, the burger. And why? Because it would make people's lives easier.
Okay.
So yeah, you could solve. No. Actually, no.
All right, applause for Joel. Burgers for everyone. Very good, very good. Cool. Well, how does this relate to the text today, yeah, and the topic today? So for you guys who are new, we're going through a study of the book of 1 John. And John wrote this letter to a church community that we think was Ephesus, right, or thereabouts, which today is like where Turkey is. So these churches are not like Jerusalem or anything like that. It shows you how the Christian community had kind of extended out. And one thing that we've been covering over the last couple of weeks, but just to remind, one of the reasons he's writing this letter is pretty clear that there was a division, or people who had previously been a part of the community had started to have some crazy thoughts, some different thoughts, some heretical ideas, right? Some teachings that were false teachings. And we can get into the fancy names of these things, Gnosticism and Docetism and all of that, but the essence of this stuff is that they were starting to latch on to a belief that there's a big separation between the spiritual world and the material or the physical world, that these two lives are disconnected. And this isn't new to these philosophies at this time. In fact, dualism, as it's called, goes back all the way to Plato, right? And Greek thinking, to where there was a spiritual world and then there was a shadowy material world. And in fact, at the time, and including in the context that we're reading here with John, the greater respect and admiration for what was real was actually the spiritual. The spiritual world was the highest order, best, most real level of existence. And the physical world, or the material world, was like this lesser world, right? It was this kind of second-class life. And so that strong separation was there. And you see this throughout these letters of John, that he keeps harping back and he keeps mentioning elements that address, we know the physical and we know the spiritual. Both of these things are true and you can't divorce them. Why? Because if you look at biblical thought, Judeo-Christian thought, these worlds are inextricably bound together. You cannot separate the physical from the spiritual, right? We see this from the very start, and we see how even in the letter of John, in the text that we read in verse 11, John refers back from the beginning. From the beginning, if you have that verse 11, you can just throw up, right? This message of love, right? And he goes back to one of the earliest stories from the Bible, right? Which is Cain. And he talks about from the beginning, you should love one another. And then he goes into the Cain example and talks about how Cain murdered his brother, right? And why did he murder his brother? He murdered his brother because of the actions. It says very clearly there, because of the actions that he was doing versus his brothers. His brother's actions were righteous and his were not. And so he murdered him, right? And so there's this dance. Well, those actions provoked jealousy, right? Provoked insecurity. So the physical moved Cain to a non-material, a spiritual quandary of insecurity and jealousy, right? Which resulted back in a physical implication where he murdered. He first hated, and then he murdered. Now, this reference is one of many that we can see in the way that God interacted with his people. And of course, if you look at the law that God gave to his people throughout history completely ties all this spiritual stuff, all these theological concepts of who God is and how is God's character, to kind of a guardrails of how we should live in the physical world. The whole law was kind of trying to bridge that. Right? So we see that evidence throughout history. And then, of course, the most amazing example is Jesus completely embodies this connect. Completely embodies the fact that the godly And the highest level of spirituality is connected to the physical because God became living, breathing, sweating, bleeding human. Took that form, walked the planet to demonstrate to us how do these two worlds crash together. And Jesus did that through his life, his teaching, first and foremost, right? When he taught in the Sermon on the Mount, we see how he shortened the distance between the spiritual and the material. When he talked about if anyone even just hates the other, he is guilty of murder. Right? So Jesus brought the distance down for you, instead of separating these two worlds. Right? You can have, as long as you have a pure heart, it doesn't matter what you do to your brother. Or you can have an evil heart as long as you treat him right. No, these things are connected. They're drawn very close together. And the other example he uses was adultery. And no, if you're even just lusting, it's almost the same as the physical. So he's brought these worlds very tightly together. And as we've talked about time and time again, but we should never get tired of mentioning it, when they pressed him to say, what does all of this stuff mean? He said it means, what is the most important commandment? It means to love God. Right? Now be very, very careful here. He didn't say to believe in God. Right? To cross some intellectual bridge that the deity of the world exists versus materialism where no God exists. He didn't talk about belief like that. The greatest commandment is to love God. And the same thing is to love your neighbor as yourself, right? Again, is it just warm fuzzies towards God and neighbor? No, it's through action, right? And then Jesus further reemphasized this when he talked about the kingdom of God and how the kingdom of God was at hand with his presence, with his life, with his embodiment of God in human form. Why was the kingdom at hand? Because this stuff that was there, pie in the sky, beautiful existence, was starting to happen. Right? It was starting to take form. And we see this not only represented in Jesus' teaching, but of course in the way he lived and the things that he did and the decisions he made and the people that he hung out with. Right? He fed people. He healed and healed and healed and healed all kinds of sick and injured people. He accepted people that were not accepted in that society. He washed feet. He turned tables over. Right? Was acting against not just at a personal level, he was making a judgment about the system. Right? Through action, not just words. And of course, this is just supremely embodied in Jesus' death, where you have the ultimate spiritual battle for the universe, embodied in this most gruesome, most torturous, most graphic physical suffering and death. If you look at Jesus' time in the garden and his time on the cross, you understand that these worlds are totally linked, completely linked together. And the interesting thing is science knows this. Even today, even amidst all the materialism, we know that our attitude and our heart shape our health. We know that people that have love and community live longer no matter what garbage they eat. Right? We know that when there's tests about medicine and everything like that, they need to give an example with the placebo. Why? Because faith matters. Faith absolutely matters. When people believe in that thing, it changes the results. They need to fake them out to get a proper test case. So we know today very well that these worlds collide. Right? Now, what is it? When we talk about faith, then it's not the intellectual knowledge. It's the trust, right? And it's very interesting that this dilemma, this separation between the material and the spiritual, continues to this day. Continues to this day. We struggle with the exact same thing. It's just we've reversed what we've elevated. We have elevated the material. And the spiritual seems like a quacky, intangible, untrustworthy part of existence because we can't feel it and touch it. But we don't hear the outrage, even in church. We don't see the evidence that there's any kind of communication like a 1 John type of letter calling us to be careful. Why? Because we too have become those heresies. We too have embraced this worldview. We too have gotten used to the idea to separate the material, the physical, the day-to-day, the real, from our faith. And our lives look a lot like this diagram, where we've kind of bucketed and compartmentalized different aspects of who we are into these categories. And the sum of these basically indicate who we are, right? I've got a certain personality characteristics. I've got a career. I've got my friendships, hobbies, and there's many more boxes. These are just examples. What I purchase, where I live. And faith is nicely tucked away as yet one of these many factors, one of these many pieces who make up who I am. Maybe even a footnote. Maybe even an afterthought. This is not the holistic, integrated, tight kind of living that God talks about, that Jesus talked about, that John is talking about, that community was committed to. They were unusual at that time. We should be unusual and peculiar today, because this is not the most easiest, comfortable worldview. It's much easier to separate out these things. Our life should look more like this diagram. Subtle cue to the tech guy. Very good. Yeah? Where the faith component, the love component, the God component, the spiritual component should be an overlying blanket, filter, however you want to see it. It should mess with every other compartment. There shouldn't be a single decision we make about career, about friends, about what to buy, where to live, political views, without it running through the love. The love we know that is God, that we believe in. And what faith is trusting that running things through that filter and making decisions in every aspect of life, though it might be scary, though it might be difficult, though it might hurt, running it through the love filter and using the love, acting in that way, in that moment, will always work out better in the long run. Always, 100%. God has given us that promise. The short run, all bets off, which is why we continually ignore the love, right? And why did I say use the love? You guys saw the Star Wars reference, right? Any Star Wars fans out there? A couple, yeah? So in the Star Wars movie, there's this energy and the force that kind of is this magical power. And like the hero of the story, Luke, right? In the early ones, he had the power to use that force. And there was his teachers were always like blipping into his head at these key challenging moments. Use the force, Luke. Right? That's when he tried to wake up and actually muster the right thing to do, the force, right? Now, these things that you guys talked about at the start in the first question as in groups, this supernatural thing, we have a superpower. It is this love. right? It goes beyond any level of comprehension what we have access to if we would use the love. It's not coming from us. And Luke in Star Wars and we in the world, we struggle because we get scared, we get nervous, and we try and solve the problem. We try and address the issue. We have more faith in our intellect and our skills. We know better. And we try and solve that thing for ourselves in the moment. We don't use the love. And God is calling us to this kind of life. Now, what does that look like and feel like when you break it down to real life? I want to share with you guys just a couple of examples as I reflected on my own life, interactions, decisions. When I heard that voice, when I consciously used the love in what I did, and when I didn't, and how those results have turned out differently. So, when I was in junior high, I was like some young adolescents out there where I was quite freaked out and nervous about whether I would be accepted by other friends, whether I was cool enough, right? Whether I would be in the circle or left out. And wherever I stood absolutely about that on that scale, of course, I doubted my standing. And so there was one dude named Kevin. And he was vulnerable to my efforts in the sense that I found it very convenient to always put him down to better secure my position as someone superior, more acceptable, more in. And I would trash Kevin, make him lesser, make fun of him, only out of the fear that I wouldn't be accepted if I wasn't better, right? I didn't even begin to hear my little mentor use the love. Wasn't even in my head. It was all me. It was all trying to address my insecurity, my need, and I dumped on Kevin time and time again. Now I'm very fortunate in that we've reconnected, over the years with like these, school reunions and everything like that. And Kevin miraculously turned out okay. Though I tried to destroy him as a 12-year-old. And I apologized. I said, dude, I'm so sorry. It was just so wrong of me, right? And by the way, I grew up a Christian. I went to church. So I dumped on Kevin, and then I went and sang church hymns, right? Lit candles and stuff, right? Because these were two compartments, entirely different, not anything having to do with the other. I went to college, and some friends of mine introduced me to a woman named Valerie. And Valerie, she wasn't a Christian, and she was attractive. And for whatever crazy reason, I guess she found me attractive. And so we kind of connected for a time, and mostly physically. And truth be told, that's exactly what I wanted out of that particular relationship. And we were together for a little while, and then we weren't. But I got what I wanted. It was all about me. A few years after we were together, I found out that Valerie took her life. What do you think she wanted from that relationship? One of another string of guys that used her? got what they wanted and moved along? Or do you think she could have used someone who shared with her how amazing she was, how loved she was by the creator of the universe, how her beauty went far deeper than her looks? That would have been using the love. But I just used her. I got what I wanted. I had the power of God's love at my fingertips, and I just didn't listen to that call. Had I treated her, have I loved her properly, would she have taken her life? What if not? What if I could have changed that outcome, or God could have changed that outcome through me? I wrestle with that to this day because I ignored that invitation to use the love. Josh was a guy I met later in college, and he'd kind of had a crazy life and done some crazy things, but for whatever reason, he showed up at my church and in my life, and we had these kind of like home groups. And my group was clearly the outcast, like the ragamuffin group of just barely hanging on folks. So he came to that one. And then one week he invited me to go have coffee with him. Yeah, sure. And so I thought this was going to be your typical, half hour, maybe hour coffee talk. And I had other plans later that evening. And Josh started talking and sharing just like everything about his life. And going on and on. And truth be told, at the start, I was like, dang, I've got plans tonight. This guy's really going on and on. But finally, this knucklehead Steve, heard that invitation and responded the right way. And I said, forget those plans. I need to be here with Josh tonight. And I think we must have spent 3 or 4 hours at that coffee shop. And it went till very, very late. And, I missed my plans and everything. But I was present in there. And I responded in the way that I thought I could with love. I got in touch with Josh a little while back, and he said, Steve, I don't know if you realize, but that was the most critical night of my life. And that conversation that changed my life. And I decided to follow God, and it's been just such a blessed life and so much healthier than the stuff I was doing up until that point. And guys, I did not say anything miraculous. I was an unwilling participant at the start, and all I did was I just surrendered to God's love and said, okay, yeah, use the love through me, right? Any which way. I didn't even realize it. I didn't think it was going to be this momentous thing, right? I just thought, okay, coffee with this dude. Yeah? You just don't know the little tiny interactions that you're having with people, what the ripples are on that, and what's going on with their lives that you wouldn't have a notion of, and they're just trying to grab some thread to hang on to. And it's just about your being available to being used by God, to saying, God, I believe this stuff. I believe this stuff is real. Yes. I won't always just look out for my short-term interests. I'll be thinking of the other, like you always do. I'll be letting you work your love through me in everything that I do. And one further example, this doesn't just apply to these relationship things as we see these compartments and boxes out there. It applies to the more systemic stuff, the bigger stuff. Post-college, I'm in the middle of my career, and considering which company, which job to work for next. And one of these options is a very nice professional title, kind of at the top of the org chart, and better pay with an organization that was a pretty well-known, well-respected organization in a city that was a city that I wanted to live in. Box checked, box checked, box checked, box checked on all the normal stuff. And there was this other company where I was going to come in more or less in the middle at the bottom of the professional roles. No fancy title, not as much pay, smaller, kind of quirky organization in a city that I wasn't particularly attracted to. And yet there was some spark in this organization, right? And for some reason, this wasn't a no-brainer decision for me, because no boxes were getting checked in that second one. But I was wrestling with it, so much to the point that I had to speak with the MD of the first organization at like 9 a.m. on Monday morning. And it was like 3 a.m. Monday morning, and my wife and I were up like laboring over this decision. And it occurred to me that maybe that restlessness was God. Maybe I should just listen a little more closely. And then it became a no-brainer in the other way. All this pay, all this title, all this working out perfectly, my goodness, there's no way I can choose that. Right? I heard that nudging, that voice, use the force, use the love. Right? And it was a job. But I can tell you on the ripple effects of that, if it weren't for choosing that one, that second one, I wouldn't be standing in front of you guys here today. That job brought me to India. That job connected me with this whole world of education and trying to help people have access to a better education. And I don't know, maybe I'm a completely substitutable piece in that. And if I hadn't said yes, someone else would have filled that spot. But I've been able to be a part of literally millions of children getting access to a better education. And just because of that one simple decision that seemed completely crazy at the time. No one makes that decision to pass up all the normal bells and whistles. That other organization was out of business within like a year or two after that. It didn't look that way where I was standing, but God knew better. God's grace is enough. You don't have to solve the problems. You don't need to depend so much on having it all organized in your pieces. But as you think about these decisions in your own life, give it up to God. Embrace that scary feeling in your stomach, that butterflies and the fear, wanting to show everyone that you're good enough, and just try and listen to the love voice of God nudging you in the right direction. And I can tell you that in the long run, it always works out better to heed that voice. Always, always, 100%. I have faith, 100% faith, to trust this God of love. That is faith, guys. It's not the intellectual belief. It's what it does day to day. So as you think about those superpowers that you talked about, that you mentioned, they might not be so crazy. They might not be so impossible. Open yourself up to the idea that with God on board, you just might be able to do that thing. You just might be able to crack teleportation. Yeah? And then as you think about that second list and those little small things, guys, don't ignore those little things. Just let God love people through you, no matter how small the way that you speak with that person at the checkout counter, how you give a little extra grace and space to your neighbors, whatever it might be in your own life, your colleagues. Are you slyly trying to make your colleagues look worse so that you can be looking better and promoted? That's not God's love. That's you lacking faith, thinking that anti-love will get you somewhere. Yeah? So these problems are there today, and I think this letter from John to us is very relevant. And this is a call to faith. And I hope I have such excitement, because this community is just a community that I see of individuals that are ready to continually say yes to that nudge. I can see it. The Klustins moved house. How many people showed up to move boxes, to bring food, to do things? I'm knocking my knucklehead head because I didn't do a darn thing for them. But I think there's so much potential in us as individuals and us as a community, because we're getting on to this thing. And we're struggling to give a little more of ourselves up to God in this way, to have this kind of faith. So I have such hope and joy to be amongst you guys. And I apologize because I know I've been selfish at times and not made myself available in a way that love would have prompted me to spend time one-on-one, to support you guys in your lives and what have you. And so I hope that I will have more of that care in mind. I hope that we all will for each other. Amen? Let's pray. Father God, we thank you for this message of how your love is a superpower, God, and how inextricably tied together our daily lives are, even the most mundane of things, with the love that you have for us, with the love that is in us, God. We ask you, Father, that you would help us to trust that what we do for that love will be better for us. Give us that faith to follow your nudgings, your proddings, wherever it might take us. In Jesus' name, amen.